Need for Speed on a steering wheel is definitely not your ordinary combination. Majority of the players wouldn't even think about hooking up a steering wheel to play some Need for Speed, and I can't blame them. Need for Speed is an arcade racing game, and therefore it never felt good on a steering wheel. Also, the wheel support was never a primary objective for the developers. But perhaps we have an exception. Need for Speed Most Wanted, for many players the best Need for Speed ever released, has in addition to all other outstanding things, one of the best wheel support among Need for Speed games. Although finding an information whether or not Most Wanted has an official support for steering wheels is extremely hard, there are some instances of the game covers on which it says that it has a Logitech Driving Force Pro steering wheel support, for example the PAL version for PS2. But some NTS/CS versions don't have any saying about steering wheel support. But your best bet is to hook up your wheel to the PC version. If you have a Logitech wheel, make sure to have the latest G-Hub installed, otherwise the wheel won't work. For other sim wheels like Thrustmasters, I can't give you any tips on how to make it work, but I have seen some people do it, so there is definitely a way. And actually, there's many people that don't know that this game can be played with a wheel, and when you think about it, yeah, this is almost 20-year-old game, and back in those days not many people had a chance to play with a wheel, and gaming steering wheel started to get popular just somewhere around that time. Although this wasn't the first Need for Speed that supported the wheel, I remember that Underground 2 also had a pretty decent wheel support, and probably even some older titles as well. A huge advantage for Most Wanted over other Need for Speed games is its physics model. It makes it more suitable for playing with a wheel than the newer Need for Speeds. For example, I just can't imagine playing Need for Speed Unbound with a wheel. I'm already struggling with the controller, trying to understand the weird-ass physics. But I have to make it clear, this definitely does not mean that playing Most Wanted on a wheel is easier than playing with a controller. At the end of the day, this game was made to be played with a controller or a keyboard. When driving around, you will quickly notice the main issue the game has, and that's horrendous amount of dead zone. You can fix this a bit with a widescreen fix mod. It lets you set the dead zone to 0, but to be honest, it still feels pretty unnatural. Now to touch upon what operating range should you pick for your wheel. Well, if you like to be challenged, you can try racing with a whole 90-degree steering angle. But sooner or later you will realize that that's a pure pain in the ass. So I recommend using operating range around 450 for racing and around 540 and above for drifting. If you have a Logitech wheel, you can set this up in Logitech G-Hub. I've done quite a few races with the wheel, and I have to tell you that it ain't easy as you would have thought. It's a totally different experience than what I was used to when playing with the controller. I think I struggle with the most is the wheel sensitivity, as I previously said, the dead zone is quite big and takes some time to adapt how much you need to turn the wheel to make the turn. But at the same time, playing with a wheel feels refreshing and surprisingly enjoyable, even though that you will sometimes find yourself struggling to keep control of the car. When it comes down to using the pedal shifters for manual transmission, be prepared for a tiny bit of delayed input. I'm not sure why is that, but it's definitely noticeable. So I keep my transmission on automatic. The game definitely lacks manual with clutch transmission, as we have in Need for Speed Carbon. It would have been a totally different experience using an H shifter, especially for drifting. Another major thing that sets apart the wheel and the controller are the steering corrections. For example, on a controller, if you turn a little too hard on one side, you could quickly correct with the counter steer, because going from full steering lock on one side to another is almost instant on a controller. Though I can't say the same for a steering wheel, where you can't react as quick as with a controller. But after a while, when you get the feeling, winning races with a wheel is much more rewarding. I was actually thinking replaying a whole game with a wheel, but I can just imagine how hard would it be to beat some of the annoying blacklist racers, or escape the last pursuit. But it would be for sure a completely different experience from what I was used to. Since I already mentioned drifting with a wheel has advantages over controller, but also some disadvantages. With steering wheel you can be much more precise with the corrections, But again, coming from a full lock on one side to another is much slower on a wheel than on a controller. Now here comes the force feedback part into play. The game has some kind of a force feedback, but most of the time the weight of the wheel feels the same, so nothing quite like in other real sim racing games. At the end, it's still a lot easier to drift the controller, but the feeling of drifting with the steering wheel is a million times better. But since the game doesn't support clutch, we have to use a handbrake to initiate the drift. You could bind it to a button on a wheel, but personally I'm not a fan of this. So if you're like me and don't have a separate handbrake, the best way to do it is to bind it to a second gear on your manual shifter. Also, don't forget to set up your car for drifting. I like to tune the steering to +4 or +5 if I'm playing with a wheel, unlike when I play with a controller, I keep it on +3. But don't expect to get it right from a first try, since you really need to put in some time to get used to the feeling and responsiveness of the wheel. And since the majority of the time you'll find yourself chased by the cops, because that's just how Need for Speed Most Wanted works, we also need to see how wheel behaves during the police pursuits. And the first thing I'm gonna tell you is, this shit ain't easy. I'm literally sweating my ass trying to escape with the wheel. If you were used to playing with a controller, after a while you got bored with the standard police pursuits, because you could quickly start predicting what police will do in a certain situation. But now, this time playing with a wheel, you have much harder time trying to keep your car on the road, dodging SUVs and crashing into a roadblocks. Because when you're chased by police, you're constantly doing some corrections, dodging the cops, finding the pursuit breakers and so on, and about a few minutes into a chase, your hands will start to feel sore from all the force feedback the wheel has. And I'm not even joking. And once you get wrapped in, good luck with getting out. If you somehow manage to get out, it will feel like you did a whole arm workout. Oh, and prepare for your neighbors knocking on your door when you start driving off-road and creating a level 8 earthquake. Nah, I'm just kidding, it's not that bad. So my conclusion is that if you already have a steering wheel, then I would definitely recommend you hooking it up and try some Need for Speed Most Wanted. Because after all, it's much more fun to play with a wheel, even if it's just a 20-year-old Need for Speed game. Of course, when you will go for some insane police pursuits or against a rubber band Earl, I recommend you keep playing with the controller, because at the end of the day it's easier and more forgiving if you make a mistake. And if you just want to drive around and chillax, which I know it's easier said than done in Need for Speed Most Wanted, then having a wheel as an option is really nice. And as I already said at the beginning, all the Logitech wheels work fine with this game, but I can't say the same for Thrustmaster wheels. So if you do decide getting a wheel, I recommend you check on the internet if you can make it work with Need for Speed Most Wanted. But as I said, at the end of the day this is still an arcade racing game and it was not really meant to be played on a wheel. And with all that said, I will end the video here. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button, drop a comment, don't forget to subscribe, and as always, have a great day and I will see you in the next one.